We're looking at a case today that it really serves as a masterclass in the digital age of criminal investigation.
Right.
It's a disappearance from December 2013, back when smartphones were everywhere, but we were maybe a little less aware of just how much data we were broadcasting, every second of the day.
Exactly.
It's a story about a disappearance, yes, but it's also about obsession, digital footprints, and a legal saga that has stretched on for well over a decade. We're talking about the disappearance of Heather Elvis.
It is a case that just haunts Horry County, South Carolina.
Yeah.
And you're so right about the data aspect.
Mm.
This investigation involves everything from cell tower triangulation to advanced video surveillance recovery and even the forensic analysis of this one very strange text message about pot stickers.
We will definitely get to that, but beyond all the technical aspects, there's this massive gaping hole right in the center of the narrative.
Heather herself. She's never been found.
And that's the tragedy we have to keep front and center throughout this whole discussion. Before we get into the data, the trials, the timeline, we have to look at the human element. At the center of this huge data dragnet is a 20-year-old woman who went on a first date and just never came home.
That's right. Heather Elvis.
Yeah.
20 years old, living in Horry County. And when you look at the source material about Heather, the word that comes up most often is relatable.
Yeah.
She'd just graduated from St. James High School in 2011. She'd moved out of her parents' house, gotten her own apartment in Carolina Forest. She was building that early adult life, working as a waitress and hostess at the House of Blues and the Tilted Kilt, studying cosmetology. She was doing all the things a 20-year-old does.
And she was close with her family, too. Her parents, Terry and Debbie, and her roommate, Brianna Worrelman. This wasn't someone on the fringes of society. She was deeply embedded in the community.
Absolutely. She had people who loved her and people who noticed immediately when she wasn't where she was supposed to be.
Which makes her disappearance on December 18, 2013, all the more shocking. She vanished, essentially, into thin air.
But, and this is the key to our analysis today, while the disappearance happened in December, the fuse for it was lit months earlier. To understand why Heather vanished, we have to understand the complex and, frankly, volatile relationship that developed in the summer of 2013.
We have to rewind to June 2013. This is where the narrative shifts from just a missing persons case to something much more complex and psychological.
Right. This is when Heather meets Sidney Moorer.
And who is he?
Sidney Moorer was 37 years old at the time. He was a repairman who serviced kitchen equipment, and he did some work at the Tilted Kilt, which is where Heather was working.
Okay, so immediately we have to acknowledge the power dynamic there.
A huge one. You have a 37-year-old man, established in his career, married, and you have a 20-year-old woman just starting out her life.
And the sources show this wasn't a subtle thing. Heather's social media posts from that time, her Twitter specifically, they document a very intense infatuation. She posted about having a taste for men who older and made these references to the guy who builds things.
It seems like she fell hard and she fell fast.
And he reciprocated.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
It started with him bringing bagels and coffee to her at work. It seems innocent at first, but the conversation shifted really quickly from just casual flirting to life-altering plans.
What kind of plans?
There was talk of Sidney leaving his wife, Tammy Moorer. There was talk of them moving to Florida together with this idea that Heather could be a nanny for his children.
That nanny detail is so interesting because it suggests a level of integration into his life that goes way beyond a casual fling.
Yes.
It implies he was selling her a fantasy of a blended family. It wasn't just, let's run away. It was, let's build a whole new structure.
Exactly. It's a very specific promise. I'll leave my current life, but I'll bring my children, and you will be part of this new unit. It creates a sense of legitimacy for the relationship.
But as happens in the vast majority of these cases, the reality crashed right into the fantasy.
It did. By September or October of 2013, the affair was discovered.
And this is where the character of Tammy Moorer enters the story. Because her reaction to discovering the affair isn't just anger, it's systemic.
That's a good way to put it. The discovery is really the turning point in this entire story. This wasn't a situation where the affair ended quietly and everyone went their separate ways.
Not at all. Tammy's reaction was described as intensely angry, but it's the aftermath of that discovery that is so specific and honestly chilling.
The correctional measures. That is probably how we should describe them. According to testimony and even Sidney's own accounts later, Tammy imposed a very, very strict set of rules to save the marriage.
Let's list these because they paint such a vivid picture of the environment inside the Moorer home. Tammy reportedly handcuffed Sidney to their bed at night.
Sidney testified to this. He claimed it was a way to ensure he remained faithful. If he's physically restrained, he can't leave the room to make a phone call or leave the house.
Total control.
She changed his phone password so only she knew it. She started accompanying him on all his jobs and any time he traveled. If he was fixing a stove at a restaurant, she was right there with him.
And perhaps the most permanent mark.
She made him get her name, Tammy, tattooed above his crotch.
It's about total control. It's about closing off any possible avenue for him to stray again. It's branding, in a sense.
It is. It's about reclaiming property. But the anger wasn't just directed inward at Sidney. It was directed outward at Heather.
This is where it turns into a full-blown harassment campaign. It wasn't enough to just stop the affair.
No. Tammy allegedly forced Sidney to call Heather and end things while she listened in. And the words used were just brutal. He told Heather she was nothing to him, just someone to use.
That kind of call is designed to humiliate. It's meant to completely shatter the other person's self-worth.
And it was followed by a barrage of text messages. Tammy sent photos of herself and Sidney in intimate situations to Heather. She sent threatening texts.
And she even contacted Heather's employer, the Tilted Kilt.
Repeatedly. She kept calling to try and get Heather fired. She told the restaurant her husband wouldn't repair their equipment anymore as long as Heather worked there.
It's a scorched earth policy. She wanted to destroy Heather's livelihood, not just the relationship. How did Heather handle all this? I mean, she's 20 years old, facing the wrath of a woman nearly twice her age, who seems determined to dismantle her life.
Initially, she engaged a bit. She was 20, she was hurt, she was in the middle of the storm. But by November, the record shows she was trying to disengage.
She was trying to get out.
She was. She sent a text to Sidney, or to the phone she thought was Sidney's, saying, "I am no one you need to worry about anymore."
Wow.
There was also a really poignant tweet from Heather in late September that kind of sums up her state of mind. She wrote, "Once upon a time, an angel and a devil fell in love. It did not end well."
She knew it was bad. She was trying to write the end of that chapter herself.
And, logistically, it seemed like the chapter had ended. In November, the Moorers actually left town. They went to Disney World from November 19th to December 11th.
For weeks.
For weeks. Supposedly to repair their marriage. And during that time, Heather was trying to get her life back on track. She had a new job lined up at a beauty parlor. She was going to church.
But there was a lingering complication.
A huge one. Heather was concerned she might be pregnant.
And the belief was that it was Sidney's child. Her manager at the Tilted Kilt mentioned she'd taken a pregnancy test that came back as an error. So this huge question mark was just hanging over her head as the Moorers returned from Disney World.
And that brings us to the night of December 17th, 2013. The timeline here is absolutely critical. This is the last night anyone saw Heather Elvis alive.
She actually went on a date that night, a first date with a guy named Steven Schiraldi.
Right. And by all accounts, it was a normal, sweet date. They drove around looking at Christmas lights. He took her to the Inlet Square Mall parking lot to teach her how to drive a stick shift.
It sounds like she was genuinely trying to look forward. It's such a normal, youthful activity learning to drive a manual car in an empty parking lot.
It is. Stephen drops her off at her apartment in Carolina Forest at 1:15 a.m. This is a verified time. He watches her go inside. He is the last known person to see her.
And then just 20 minutes later, everything changes. At 1:35 a.m., there's a call to Heather's cell phone. But it doesn't come from a normal mobile number. It comes from a payphone at a gas station.
A payphone in 2013.
Exactly.
That in itself is significant. By 2013, payphones were rapidly disappearing. To find one and to use one, it implies a specific intent. It implies a desire to be untraceable.
If you use your cell phone, there's a record. If you use a payphone, you're anonymous, or so you think.
Right. And the call lasted for 5 minutes.
So what happens after that call?
Immediately after, at 1:44 a.m., Heather calls her roommate, Brianna. Now, Brianna was out of town visiting family, but she answers. And she describes Heather as hysterical.
And this is the most crucial witness account we have of Heather's state of mind in those final moments.
It is. Heather tells Brianna that Sidney called. She says he told her he was leaving his wife and that he wanted to meet her right then.
In the middle of the night.
Yes. And Brianna, being a protective friend, she begged her not to go. She told her to sleep on it, don't do anything rash. But the call ended after about 10 minutes. And that is the last conversation Heather Elvis ever had.
From this point on, it's all digital.
From 2:30 a.m. onwards, we have to rely entirely on electronic data. We are tracking her cell phone pings. And the movement creates a very, very disturbing map.
So at 2:30 a.m., Heather's phone calls that payphone number back.
But there's no answer. Then her phone starts to travel. It goes to a place called Longbeard's Bar and Grill. It stays there for about 15 minutes. Then it moves to a place called Augusta Plantation Drive, then back to Longbeard's.
That's erratic. It sounds like she's looking for someone or being sent to different places.
We're waiting. It's hard to say. And then, briefly, the phone returns to her apartment. And then there's a call to Sidney Moorer's actual cell phone, a 4-minute call.
So the pretense of the payphone is gone. Now she's calling his direct line.
It appears so. And finally, the phone moves to a place called Peachtree Landing. This is a boat launch on the Waccamaw River. The time is 3:37 a.m.
Peachtree Landing is not a busy place at 3:30 in the morning.
No, it's isolated, it's dark.
And at that location, what do the records show?
At Peachtree Landing, there are several frantic attempts to call Cindy's phone again. No answer. And then, at 3:42 a.m., the data records just stop. The phone either dies or is destroyed. The location places it in the Waccamaw National Wildlife Refuge.
And then, silence.
Total silence.
The next day, December 19th, the discovery is made. But it isn't Heather. It's her car. Her green Dodge Intrepid is found at Peachtree Landing.
And the condition of the car is baffling to investigators. It was parked perpendicularly, taking up multiple spaces, which is just odd behavior. It was locked. But when police opened it, Heather's purse, her keys, and her phone were all gone.
It was a scene that offered zero clues as to where she went, only where she had been. Usually if someone parks a car to harm themselves, or if they just go for a walk, they leave those things behind.
Right. Taking the purse and keys suggests she expected to go somewhere else, or someone took them from her. It suggests an interruption of a routine.
The police and dive teams searched the Waccamaw River immediately.
They did. They found nothing. There was a moment later on where bones were found, but they turned out to be from a male, totally unrelated to this case.
So the physical search hits a dead end, basically.
It does. But the digital and video investigation was just getting started. And this is where the alibis start to crumble. Remember that payphone call at 1:35 a.m.?
Yeah.
Police pulled the video surveillance from the Kangaroo gas station where that payphone was located. And there, on video, is Sidney Moorer making that call.
Which directly contradicts his initial story.
Completely. He denied making the call until he was confronted with the video evidence. But that wasn't the only video. There's footage from a Walmart at 1:12 a.m. showing Sidney buying a pregnancy test and cigars.
The pregnancy test. That ties directly back to Heather's fear that she might be pregnant.
Exactly. Why would Sidney Moorer be buying a pregnancy test in the middle of the night if, as he claimed, he'd had no contact with Heather? It suggests he knew about her concerns and was maybe even using that to lure her out.
It's a powerful piece of evidence. And then there's the truck.
The truck. Police pulled surveillance from private security cameras along the route between the Moorer home and Peachtree Landing, and they spotted a dark Ford F-150.
Which was Sidney's truck.
They identified it as his. The truck is seen driving toward the landing at 3:36 a.m. and then returning at 3:45 a.m.
That 9-minute window.
That 9-minute window aligns perfectly with the pings from Heather's phone at the landing.
So you have Heather's phone arriving at the landing at 3:37 a.m. You have Sidney's truck driving toward the landing at 3:36 a.m. It puts them in the same place at the exact same time.
It does. Now, the Moorers claimed they were home. They claimed they had no contact with Heather since November. But there's one text message that stands out as just bizarre.
The pot stickers text. This is one of the strangest details of the entire case.
It really is. At 3:37 a.m., the exact minute Heather's phone arrives at the boat landing, Tammy Moorer sends a text to Sidney's phone asking him to pick up pot stickers and orange juice. And he replies, "Yes, ma'am."
At 3:37 in the morning, who asks for pot stickers at that hour? It's absurd.
Analysts looked at this and saw it as a potential alibi construction, or maybe even a coded message. It seems incredibly convenient that at the exact moment the crime is allegedly taking place, there's this mundane domestic text message timestamp to place them, or at least one of them, in a domestic mindset.
But the video evidence of the truck puts Sidney on the road.
Exactly. So the text doesn't hold up. It feels like they were trying to outsmart the data, but they didn't realize how much data there actually was. They were trying to create a digital trail that said grocery run, but the physical surveillance said boat landing.
They were playing a game of deception, but the surveillance grid was just too dense. Let's move to the arrest, because this didn't happen overnight. It took until February 2014 for them to be taken into custody.
It did. Police executed a search warrant at the Moorer home. It was a massive operation. They shut down the highway, and they arrested both Sidney and Tammy.
And the charges were heavy.
Very. Murder, kidnapping, obstruction of justice, and even indecent exposure.
The indecent exposure charges seem like an outlier here.
The sources say it was related to explicit photos found on their phones, not directly to the crime against Heather. Later, they even tacked on Medicaid fraud charges for failing to disclose income. I mean, they threw the book at them.
But there was a problem, a big one for the prosecution.
Yeah.
No body, no murder weapon. They had a lot of circumstantial evidence, the phone calls, the truck, the affair, but no direct physical evidence linking the Moorers to a murder.
And that lack of physical evidence really defined the legal saga that followed.
It's important to note the atmosphere in Horry County at this time, too. There was a full-on social media war happening.
Oh, it was toxic. You had Moore supporters versus Elvis supporters. Tammy and Sidney had been posting online before their arrest, calling Heather a stalker. Both families filed harassment complaints against each other.
It got so bad the court had to impose a gag order.
They did, on all participants, because it was getting so out of hand in the public sphere.
So, fast forward to 2016, the murder charges are actually dropped.
Yes, they were dropped without prejudice, which means the state could bring them back later if they found new evidence. But at that time, they didn't feel they could prove murder beyond a reasonable doubt without a body, so they decided to proceed with the kidnapping charges against Sidney.
And this was the first major trial. June 2016, Sidney Moorer on trial for kidnapping.
The prosecution laid out everything we've discussed. The cell phone records, the video of the truck, the pregnancy theory, and the defense argued it was all circumstantial. They had to admit to the affair at that point, but they denied the crime. Their argument was, even if he met her, there's no proof he took her.
And the result was a mistrial.
A hung jury. 10 voted to convict, 2 to acquit.
That must have been devastating for the Elvis family, to be that close.
It was. And in the aftermath, Sidney actually went to jail for a bit because he spoke to the media, violating that gag order we mentioned.
But the state wasn't done with him. In 2017, they tried Sidney for obstruction of justice.
Correct. This was specifically about him lying to the police about making that payphone call. And this trial brought out a chilling new detail.
What was that?
Tammy's cousin testified. He said that Sidney had shown him a photo that implied he knew more than he was saying. Later, it was revealed in a Dateline episode that this was allegedly a photo of Heather appearing injured or possibly deceased.
That is just horrific.
It is. And the jury convicted him on the obstruction charge. He got 10 years in prison. But the big question of what happened to Heather was still legally unanswered.
Until 2018. The focus then shifted to Tammy Moorer.
Yes, she was indicted for conspiracy to kidnap, and her trial, well, the prosecution didn't hold back. They characterized her as the evil queen.
They used that Disney reference explicitly.
They did, playing on the Moorers' love for Disney World. The theory was that Tammy was the mastermind, that her jealousy over the affair and the potential pregnancy drove her to orchestrate the entire kidnapping. They argued she was pulling the strings.
And they had the evidence to back it up.
They brought out the threatening texts, the testimony about the handcuffing to show her controlling nature. And they focused on that timeline, the fact that she was awake and texting at 3:37 a.m.
What was the defense's strategy?
The defense stuck to the story that Heather was a stalker. Tammy even took the stand herself. She claimed she had forgiven Heather. She denied the handcuffing, despite what was said in previous police statements. And she claimed they went out for sex and a pregnancy test that night.
But there was a dramatic twist in the courtroom involving Tammy's family.
A huge, huge error. Tammy's children and her mother were barred from testifying because they were caught watching the trial online.
There was a sequestration order.
Yes, meaning witnesses aren't allowed to watch the proceedings, so their testimony isn't influenced. They violated it. So the defense lost its key alibi witnesses in one fell swoop.
And in the end, the jury didn't buy Tammy's story.
Not at all. She was found guilty of kidnapping and conspiracy. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison.
It was a massive verdict. It finally assigned some accountability.
It did. And following that momentum, the state decided to retry Sidney on the kidnapping charges in September 2019.
And this time, with the precedent of Tammy's conviction set, the result was different.
This time, he was found guilty. He also received a 30-year sentence.
So as we sit here in 2026, both Sidney and Tammy Moorer are in prison. They appealed, of course.
They did. They argued there was insufficient evidence. They argued about the reliability of the expert witness who identified the headlights of the truck in the surveillance video. They argued that the social media frenzy had prejudiced the jury against them.
And what was the result of those appeals?
In 2023, the South Carolina Court of Appeals denied the appeals. The state Supreme Court then denied a review.
But the legal maneuvering hasn't stopped completely. Just last year, in 2025, Sidney filed another motion.
He did. A motion for a new trial. He's alleging jury intimidation and claiming there is some withheld DNA evidence. It feels like a long shot, given the history, but it shows he is still fighting the conviction.
Currently, Tammy is projected for release in 2043 and Sidney in 2044. They'll be in their 60s and 70s.
Which brings us right back to the beginning. We have convictions, we have sentences, but we don't have Heather.
That's the part that's so hard to swallow. Heather Elvis has never been found. The Waccamaw River is vast. The wildlife refuge is dense.
And without a confession, without someone breaking their silence, it's very likely we may never know exactly where she is. The investigation proved that she was taken. It proved who took her. But it couldn't bring her home.
It really highlights how a digital footprint can build a cage around a perpetrator, though. The texts, the pings, the surveillance video, it all created this web they couldn't escape, even without the physical evidence of a body.
It does. It serves as a powerful reminder that in the modern age, you can't simply erase a person without leaving a trace of your own actions. The Moorers thought they were being clever with payphones and coded text messages, but the aggregate data told the truth.
It is a tragic story, and one that is still so painful for the community in Myrtle Beach and Carolina Forest. We want to thank you for spending this time with us to walk through the details of Heather's case. It's complex and it is heavy, but it's important to remember the human life at the center of it all.
Absolutely.
Thanks for listening.